Okay, today we're in the book of Proverbs, and we're down in chapter 15, and the last week we closed with verse 18. Now, again today we're going to be taking several proverbs and looking at one and then maybe skipping one or two and then hitting another proverb and going through and picking out those that I think might be of the greater amount of interest to us as we go along. Now, in verse 19, in chapter 15, verse 19, he makes a statement here that we have to stop and think about just a little bit. He said, "The way of a sluggard is as a hedge of thorns, but the path of the upright is made a highway." So that causes us to stop just a minute and think, what's that talking about in here? The way of a sluggard is as a hedge of thorns. So think about it in this way. Here it is again, and he's talked about a sluggard in many, many different ways, and he will continue to talk about sluggards. And that is people do not do their work when they need to do it, so they're going to be in poverty and so forth. So he says, now, the way of a sluggard is a hedge of thorns. So think about this. We've all driven down a highway, and we look out the side of the highway, and there is a great big blackberry bush, maybe taking up several acres, 100 yards thick and so forth, that is in there. All right, we're going down, suppose that you're walking. And so you're walking down that road, and it is just a nice, easy road. And then all of a sudden, for some reason, you have to turn and go through the blackberry bush. So try to visualize what that would be like. Now that's what he's saying here. He's saying that there's two ways to live. There's one way that you live as the sluggard, and the other way that you live is not being the sluggard, but you are an upright individual. Now he said the path of the upright is made a highway. That is, if you always do what is right, then as you walk through life, it's like walking down a road. But the path of a sluggard is like taking a right turn and having to walk through 100 yards of blackberry vines. And so you get to thinking, boy, that wouldn't be pleasant at all, having to fight your way through. Shake her head and say, how in the world could we get through such a miserable situation as that? That's his whole point. His whole point is that there's two ways to live here. And if you live as an upright person, then your life is going to be smooth. If you live as a sluggard, your life is going to be one of great pain and trying to walk through a hedge of thorns or blackberry bushes. Then he goes on, and I think I'll skip, verse 20. We've talked about that quite frequently. And in verse 21, folly is joy to him that is void of wisdom, but a man of understanding maketh straight his goings. So if a person doesn't really have wisdom, then folly is fun. Folly is something that is great joy to that individual. If you do have wisdom, why, then you're going to make your going straight. You're going to learn how to live. You're going to do what is right. But to the fool, to the man without wisdom, folly, foolishness, stupidity, doing ungodly things, that's great joy to that kind of an individual. I think we all look around a lot of times and we see people that do the dumbest thing. They get drunk, they decide they're going to have fun, they go to a party, they get drunk, they drive home, they get a ticket, they have to pay big fines, they go to jail, they get up the next day, they have trouble with their job, and their life is just all messed up. It's in there. That's folly. And that's what he's talking about here, that is the kind of a life that some people think is a joyful life. It's a happy life. It's a contented life. But that is a life that you have if you're void of wisdom. Then in verse 22, where there is no counsel, purposes are disappointed, but in the multitude of counselors they are established. Now, all this is saying is that we need to seek advice. That when we're getting ready to do something, we need to ask people who have been there what they would recommend. People that know something about the situation, what would you recommend? And the more important it is, the more necessary to ask people. Get a lot of advice. If you're going to go into business, go to a lot of business people. Get a lot of advice. Ask them, what do you think about going into business now? What would you suggest I do? I'm getting ready to go into landscaping. What are your suggestions? Can you give me some advice? And then when they give you advice and say, now make sure that you don't do this, then you might not be able to see it at that time, but don't do it. Don't do it. Take the advice of the counselors. Now this is what he's saying here in, where there is no counsel, purposes are disappointed. So if I'm getting ready to go into some kind of business, I just launch myself into it, whatever it is, I'm going to make so many mistakes that it's going to fail, and I'm going to be disappointed. But on the other hand, if I will get counsel from all of these people, then I can have something that is going to profit. So always keep that in mind, that if you're getting ready today to make a decision like, where shall we eat lunch after services? Shall we go get a hamburger or go get Mexican food or something? Now, it's not too important to get counseling in a thing like that. I mean, if you go to a bad place, so you've lost a few dollars, but if you're really going to be wise and you want to go to a Mexican food and you don't know, you've never been there, it'd be wise to say, hey, which is the best Mexican restaurant in town? Where do you think I should go? One guy said, oh, don't go here, go over there. Ask somebody else. Oh, don't go over there, but go here. So ask somebody else. That if you want to get the best restaurant, if you'll ask 10 people, you'll probably get a pretty good answer. Right? Probably get a pretty good answer. One of them tells you to go to this one, 9 says, no, don't go to that one. You'll probably get a pretty good answer. Now, that's not a big deal. So we're not saying spend a whole lot of time getting counsel and something of that nature. But let's suppose you're going to buy a car this afternoon. That's a pretty big deal. Go get some counseling. Go out here and look, and who owns a car like you're getting ready to buy? Are you going to buy a Ford or a Nissan, or who owns one? Go talk to Jim Riggs, a mechanic, and ask him, what do you think is the best way to go in here? So where there are lots of counselors, where there's people that can give you wise advice, he says that's the way that you live life without making a whole lot of mistakes. So think about it in that realm. That is, do you want to go through life having to make all of the decisions on your own experience when you don't have any experience? Or do you want to go through life having access to half a dozen other people? So if you want to buy a car or buy a house, or you want to change jobs or start a new business, you have people out there that you can go to. That's what he's talking about. So if you want to be successful, make sure that you use counseling and get all the advice that you possibly can. 23. Now keep in mind, he's jumping from subject to subject, but these are things that we all fit into as we go through our daily life. A man hath joy in the answer of his mouth, and a word in due season, how good it is. Now that's one that we have to think about a minute. Joy in the answer of his mouth. Now, what really does that mean? All right, it's talking about this, that if somebody comes up and asks me a question, and so you ask me a question you don't know, but I know it. I've been there. I've made the mistakes, and so I know the best answer. So you ask me a question, and I'm able to give you a good answer. That is joy to me. When somebody is able to help somebody, give them a good answer, there's a great amount of joy in that, being able to help people in that way. So he says that's one of the joys of life in here. And a word in due season, how good it is. A word in due season is advice that's spoken at the proper time. So if you come up and you have a problem and you don't know what the answer to the problem is, and you ask me, and I do know what the answer is, and so I can tell you, here's what the answer is, here's what you do, and you can save somebody a lot of trouble, that gives you a great amount of joy in doing that. This week, I was over in Everett, and I came out of a restaurant, and there was a note on my windshield that says there's a nail in your right front tire. And so, oh boy, so I go around and look, and there's a screw that is in there. I'm not too far from Swab, and so I think, wow, whew, I'm sure glad they put that on there. I'm sure glad they gave me that advice. All I've got to do now is drive up the street here about a mile, and I can have it fixed, and I won't end up with a flat tire on the highway. Wow. Well, the interesting thing is that I go around and look, I come around, start to get in the car, and here runs a woman out of the restaurant. And she said, I put that note on there, I put it on there, and I didn't know whether you knew it. And so she started talking about this. Now, the interesting thing is, it gave her a lot of joy to do that. That's the point that I'm making. Now, it gave me a lot of joy in saving me a lot of trouble. So I was happy, I was contented. I drive up there and get it taken care of. But she didn't have to come out. I mean, she was sitting in there and she was watching me. And she sees me read her note. She sees me go around, I look at the tire. There it is. I come back around. There's no need for her to come out. What can she do? She's already told me about the nail. But she came out there and she was excited. Now, here's the whole point. Here's the point of what this is talking about. That when you're able to give advice and save people problems, it brings you joy. So it brought her a lot of joy to be able to come out and say, I'm the one that did this. And so I say, thank you, boy, I really thank you. And it gave her a lot of joy that she helped somebody. So now here in the book of Proverbs, you say, why is that in there? Well, remember what the book of Proverbs is about. If you break it down, it talks about 100 different subjects. But what these subjects all boil down to is that these are things that he deals with that helps you live the good life. If you want to live a good, happy life, here's the way you do it. So this morning, what we've learned here is that if you want to live a good, happy life, when you're getting ready to go into something that you're not sure about, get lots of counsel, get lots of advice. Go ask people, and it will save you from making a lot of mistakes. Then, on the other hand, if you want to be happy, just understand when you do people good, when you're able to give them a good answer, that gives you a great deal of joy. As we say, it makes your day. So, this is what the proverb has said life is all about. Life is more than just making money. Life is more than just having a party. Life consists of such things as this. If you want to have a happy life, be able to give people an answer in due season that will really, truly help them. That woman probably still tells somebody about finding that nail, see? She's probably still getting a lot of joy out of that. So when you're able to help people, get joy, enjoy the joy. That's where the real joy comes into play. Okay, well, there is so many things, and some of them to skip over in here because we would just get bogged down trying to hit them all. let me look at verse 26. Evil devices are an abomination to Jehovah, but pleasant words are pure. Now, I read that one because we have already found some things that are an abomination to Jehovah. Now, if you came up to me and you said, Lowell, do you like, and then you name something like that. Well, you understand what I mean. But if I come back and I say, that is an abomination to me, you would get a different viewpoint. You would understand that I detest it. I hate it. If you came up and said, Lowell, do you like off-colored jokes? And I say, no. Well, then you get a point. But if I come back and I say, they are an abomination unto me, you know now that I detest them, that I don't want to have anything to do with them. Now, there are several things that are an abomination to God. And if we want to live a good, happy life on this earth, we need to make sure that we keep away from those things that are an abomination. He's already talked about various abominations. One of them, the last time, was if an evil person offers a sacrifice to God, even the sacrifice is an abomination to God. He doesn't want to have anything to do with people who are evil and then try to please him, pacify him, by offering him something. Well, here's another abomination. Evil devices are an abomination to Jehovah. Later on in the book of Proverbs, he's going to talk about merchants. Now, today, when you go into a store, you buy fruit, you buy whatever it is, you put it up, they put it up on a scale, and it's just automatically computerized and so forth. Reads it out, so much pound, and here it is, and bing. And so you've got it up here. We have the state auditors come around, and they audit your scales, and make sure that your scales are right. Now, back in these days, merchants would carry their scales with them. They'd have their scales, and they'd fold them up and have them in their pockets or have them in a sack or something, and they'd be going through town and selling something. So let's suppose they're selling flour. So you meet the guy and you say, I want to buy a pound of flour. Well, he would dip in there, get out a sack, he'd get out his scale, put it up here. He'd have a little weight and put over here 1 pound, and then he'd put flour over here. And when it balances it out, well then you bought a pound of flour. Well, he's going to talk about unjust weights. And that is that those merchants, many times when they took a pound, they would make sure that they'd filed it off, and their pound only weighed 3/4 of a pound. So when you bought a pound of flour, he puts this thing up here that says 1 pound weight. Then you get that much flour, but his weight only weighs 3/4 of a pound. Then he has... You've only bought 3/4 of a pound, and you got cheated. Now, on the other hand, if he's selling it, then he'll turn it around so that it works the other way. It's in there. Now, unjust weights. They're unjust things, and it's such things as this that he's talking about. Anything that you use, that you measure, or that you tell people about, whatever it is, if it is not fair, if your foot, and I'm talking about 12 inches, if your yardstick is not a full 3 feet, it's an abomination to God. If your pound is not 16 ounces, it's an abomination to God. And so God wants you, whatever you do and however you interact with other people, to make sure that you do not cheat them, because that is an abomination to him. Now, 27, he that is greedy of gain troubleth his own house, but he that hateth bribes shall live. Now, this is interesting. He that is greedy of gain. Now, Scott talked a lot about money when he was teaching class and talked about, you just find it all the way through. And as people who count things up, they say there's more teaching about money than any other subject in the Bible. Well, that's not unusual because the Bible deals with your life. And, of course, the book of Proverbs is dealing with your everyday life. Now, how many days in your life do you live without dealing some way with money? So think about it. How long has it been since you didn't have any money in your dealings? You didn't buy a cup of coffee, you didn't do this, you didn't do that. And so you say, when you get to thinking about it, every time that I eat something at home, whether it's a bowl of soup or a hamburger or whatever it is, it has to do with money. Because I have to go replenish that, and it has to do with money. Whenever I drive my car, maybe I don't have to stop and fill up this time, but if I drive it somewhere, it means I've got to stop and fill up the next time or the time after that. It deals with money. If you're going to go to Costco tomorrow, you might not buy any gas, but it's 10 miles from here to Costco. That's 20 miles round trip. That's the average car, a gallon. And now then, what is it now, $3.60, something like that, a gallon? And so you're dealing with money. Just anything that you do deals with money. So he teaches on this. Now here it is. We've heard the old proverb that the love of the money is the root of all kind of evil. See, we've heard that. But that's not what the Bible says. It says the love of money is the root of all kind of evil. Money is not evil or good within itself. It's just a thing. It has no moral virtue in it. It's just a thing. I have a little slip of paper. Is this paper good or bad? Is it evil or no? You say it has nothing to do. See, it's nothing that's in there, and that is right. See, that is right. Now suppose that I told you that I have 100 of these little slips up here, and on each one of these little slips I have written, I owe you $100, and I have my name down to it. And so if you got this slip of money, or you got this slip, it means you can come and collect $100 off of me. Now, I just wrote it down, but now then, see, you wouldn't give me anything. How many of you give me $1 for this slip that I've got on here? You're not about to do that. But if I had that written on there, and you could take this slip and then after services come to me and collect $100 off of me, now it would be of value. You see, it would be of value then when you got that. Okay, now as we look at this, we say, all right, now is this piece of paper, is it good or bad? It's neither one. But somebody could say, okay, I love that. I want to collect as many of those yellow slips as I can. I'm going to try to slip up there. And you take somebody like Scott, he may come up here in a minute and act like he's adjusting the computer. He says, Lowell, let me do something. So he gets down and adjusts the computer, and he's reaching over and taking 10 of these little yellow slips, you see. Well, why does he do this? Because of his love, his love for this. That's where the problem come in, is that if he has a love, if he's greedy, that's where the problem comes in. And so it's not money, it's the greed that we have. It's the love of money that we have. Now, Paul talks about this in the 1 Timothy letter. And he makes an interesting observation that You might just take the time to turn over there and read in 1 Timothy in chapter 6. Notice what he has to say. Here he's writing to Christians. But they that are minded to be rich. Now stop and chew on that for a minute. They that are minded to be rich. That's your mind. We're dealing now with somebody who is greedy. It's what you want. They that are minded to be rich fall into a temptation and a snare and many foolish and hurtful lusts, such as drown people in destruction and perdition. So now, what does it take? What does it take to bring a lot of problems upon yourself? You say, well, if you're rich, that brings a lot of problems because lots of money brings lots of problems. No. That's really not it. Now, some problems about what to do with it and how to handle it, but that's not. Those are not real problems of life. You see, that you've got. But what is a real problem of life? It's not the money. It's the minded to be rich. It's the problem of us wanting more money, wanting to be rich. There's where our problem lies in this world. That's where the big thing is. It's not being rich. It's wanting to be rich. It's wanting to have happiness comes in. Now he said, for those of us who are minded to be rich, we fall into a temptation and a snare and many foolish and hurtful lusts. We're going to fall into a lot of temptations, a lot of things that are going to hurt us, lots of snares that are going to come our way. So you stop to think now, in the world of finance, in the world of money, how many times are there in your life where if you cheated, you lied, you got overpaid and you didn't give it back, how many times in your life have you had the opportunity to take advantage of other people? Now, you say, well, it happens quite frequently. Yeah, that's true. Happens quite frequently. And if you're minded to be rich, what's your problem? See? Now, if you're not minded to be rich, if you don't have that, when somebody overpays you, you can say, excuse me, I think you gave me $5 too much. And you can give it back to them, and it doesn't ruin your whole day. But if you're minded to be rich, gives you $5 too much, now then you have a big decision to make. Shall I give it back, which is against my desires, or shall I keep it, which is against my religious conviction? And so I just can't feel like I'm pleasing to God and do what I want to do. And so you've got a big problem. You want to please God, you want to please you. And so either way you go, you're going to be miserable. If you say, well, I'm going to please God, so you give it back, you're going to be miserable because you didn't want to give it back. Now, stretch it on out. Suppose it's $20,000 instead of $5, and you give it back. That'd keep you awake all day, wouldn't it? You see? And so you look at it and you see that, and you say, boy, this would do that. All right? Now he says, for the love of money is a root of all kind of evil, which some having reached after have been led astray from the faith, have pierced themselves through with many sorrows. So what happens? Well, those who have this love of money, this desire to be rich, this love of money, now he said they pierced themselves through with many sorrows, going to be an unhappy life, and you fall away from the faith, and all kind of problems come into your life. So now the key, and this is the key in the book of Proverbs all the way through, and you'll notice, that is, it's not money per se. but it's our attitude toward money is what really makes us happy or makes us unhappy. Okay, there's where the time says, the clock says it's time to stop today, so we'll not go any farther on that.